So this past winter here, January 22 or so, we were visiting the southwestern region, specifically the Four Corners area here on the Colorado side. One of the big attractions there is Mesa Verde National Park, which is just outside of Cortez, Colorado. And there's a visitor center at the entrance there, but it was closed on the day we visited. But as you can see, there was this nice little monument paying respect to all the indigenous tribes who are descendants of the ancient ancestral pueblos that inhabited this region once upon a time. And yeah, to get up to the actual cliff dwellings, which this place is famous for, there's about a 20-mile scenic drive up the mountain and through the mesas, and it's got a lot of breathtaking views of the topography of the surrounding region of, basically we're in Montezuma County, Colorado, so the southwesternmost county of Colorado, right next to La Plata County. And yeah, so there's a lot of interesting points of interest up along the route to the cliff dwellings, including this tunnel that we're driving through here. And I'm gonna try to speed it up. I don't want to make a video of just me driving, up the mountain here, and really want to get to the actual point of interest, which is the cliff dwellings. But yeah, definitely take some time to visit this place. It's not just a stop and go, you gotta make the 20-mile trek up a mountain. It's a lot of interesting things to see, a lot of nice picturesque views and nice things to see and learn along the way, on the way to the cliff dwellings, which are coming up here pretty soon. Well, as you can see from the clips, it was pretty dry, and this is a pretty dry region of the country. But yeah, there was some recent forest fires that came through here and cleaned up a lot of the brush on top there. And yeah, as I mentioned, there are many places you can stop along the way up here. One of these roads there was kind of closed off from the snow in the winter, but we were lucky to come during this time of year where there's not that many tourists visiting, because it's technically the off season, though you can still visit it and pay and get your pass to come up here and see all the sights. But just the scenery itself is worth the trip. So good things come to those who wait and are patient. And indeed, after about 30 minutes to an hour, depending how fast you drive, and you shouldn't drive too fast on some of these roads for sure, you'll eventually get to the top here, to the first of the cliff dwellings. And this first one that we come to is called Spruce Tree House. A lot of mostly pinyon trees, in fact, but there are some spruce trees along the trail that leads up to the actual site, which the trail was actually closed during the winter to reach the site for maintenance reasons. But you can see it from not too far away, and there are trails that go up and around, and there's some smaller ones that you could access depending on the time of year. But yeah, summer and spring are the best time. It's the season to visit, but it's more expensive, of course, and more crowded. And so yeah, here we are. We're just trekking along one of the trails that go around Spruce Tree House, trying to find some other sites. But we didn't. We took a good 3-mile walk up and through the woods, and there was scat. For those of you who don't know, that's like poop of mountain lions or bobcats, and so we were a little bit cautious about going too deep into the trail there, because we don't have any real way to protect ourselves should we have come across a mountain lion with her cubs, for example. That would be pretty dangerous. But it is a nice nature trail, and but yeah, exercise any caution you may need to for the trails here. As you can see, there's some scat there, and you could tell that it was probably a carnivore, so most likely a bobcat or a mountain lion, by the fur in the scat. So some little critter was eaten recently in the poop, as you can see. Yeah, but there's also dogs. People walk their dogs too, but generally there's not fur in dog poop. There's ways to tell specifically. But yeah, nice picnic areas throughout. And so we did make a picnic out of our visit to Mesa Verde National Park here to have some lunch, and I recommend it to anybody. But yeah, and there's more sites along the way. Pit House, as you can see, is something that's particularly interesting about the history of this region and how the people inhabited it more than 1,000+ years ago. And there's lots of information. I'll let you pause the screen and read if you want to learn more about how things are done here, but it's definitely worth a visit, and especially if you have the imagination of how people lived in such a extreme environment, specifically during the winters. It is pretty cold up here on this mountain. And so initially the people lived in these pit houses. Basically, they dug into the earth, so taking advantage of geothermal energy. And they had fire pits in these pit houses to warm and cook. And they had special ways to ventilate, of course, the smoke and get the smoke out of the region. And so that was how the earlier settlers accordingly lived here in these pit houses before the cliff dwellings, according to the information provided. And so eventually they did move into these cliff dwellings down the road. But yeah, I encourage anybody who's really interested in this to either read some books or research on it, or actually visit the site to get all the information you could ever hope for about what possibly went on in this site, 1,000 years ago. I mean, this site was, just so you guys know, you guys and girls and pals and everything in between know, that it was, vacated by the time the Spanish explorers arrived to the region. So, anywhere from 600 to 800 years ago, the people just left. And it, coincides right about the time of the Maunder Minimum, when this place was vacated. They don't really talk about that much here. They just say, oh, it's a mystery. Where did all the people go? Why did they go? But, it was, anybody who knows about the recent history of human and civilization and paleontology, there was this thing called the Maunder Minimum around the, starting around the 1500s, where it got really extremely cold in parts of North America and Europe. And so it only makes sense that these ancestral Pueblo people sought warmer, less extreme environments during that time. And so I don't really think it's much of a mystery, but a lot of people say it's a mystery. But anyway, nonetheless, we can only speculate and guess. But there's a lot of information provided, and a lot we do know about the way these ancestral Pueblo people. You hear me saying ancestral Pueblo people. You'll hear a lot of people conventionally call it the Anasazi, which is actually a Navajo word. And so there's some controversy around that word and what it means and what it infers. But it's not really only or exclusively Navajo descendants that claim, that their ancestors were from this region and these particular settlements. There's many tribes, as you saw in the beginning of this video, that claim or believe to be descendants of these ancestral Pueblo people. So basically, as you can gather from a lot of the signage here at these stops in the pit houses, there was various phases that they believe the inhabitants went through here. Of course, initially they were in these pit houses exclusively in the ground, which would have taken advantage of the geothermal energy to regulate, temperatures in an extreme environment. And then eventually they advanced to be able to build above ground, like adobe Pueblo buildings to live in. And this is all before the final and latter stage where they've ultimately moved into these cliff dwellings, according to what the researchers believe. But there's a lot of information. You can pause at any time to read some of this information, which I try to gather for you, or better yet, go to the actual Mesa Verde National Park, and visit and read yourself directly, as well as you can get so many books and literature on what was going on. And if you visit on the right day where the museum and visitor center is open, there's even more information which I wasn't able to gather here. But I'm particularly fascinated by the circular type buildings that were in the ground, and they were, obviously warm and heated by these fire pits that were specifically ventilated in a certain way that they developed over hundreds, maybe thousands of years, how to do that and able to live in this extreme environment without electricity or modern utilities as we're used to. Because you can only imagine if the modern man and human or woman or whatever went and tried to live in these extreme environments without, the modern conveniences of fossil fuels, or, gas or electricity at all, how difficult, if not impossible, it would be. But yeah, as you can see the bottom, they go through all those phases according to what the archaeologists and anthropologists have come to the consensus about the specific timeline. But as you can see, after 1200 CE, so about 700-800 years ago, everything they just kind of fall off the map. And like I said, this coincides coincidentally with the Maunder Grand Solar Minimum. So it's not really much of a mystery in my eyes, but maybe I'm missing something. Anyhow, feel free to pause or slow down the speed if you want to read any of this information that I've captured here. It's such intriguing information if you're interested at all in building or anthropology or civilization in general. I definitely think there's a lot to be learned from visiting sites like this and learning about what we believe, how they lived 100, 500, 1,000 years ago. yeah, I definitely think we can learn something in our coming age of how things might turn out should things go the way they've gone in the past, if that makes sense. But yeah, definitely interesting how the pit houses worked, where they had these ventilation shafts where you can see the fire, and they somehow diverted the smoke in and out, and were able to divert the heat and energy and radiant heat to come into the actual abode, while also taking advantage, like I said, of the geothermal properties of Earth. But of course, you got to imagine how some of these structures might have looked with roof structures, which were probably mostly using timber, lumber from the local area. So maybe some, aside from spruce trees, you do have some, once you go up in higher elevation, ponderosa and lodge poles that were used. In particular here at this site, it's pretty near Durango and the Silver La Plata Mountains. So there wasn't that much of a distance that they had to transport the lumber to get to these sites that they needed. Compared to like Chaco Canyon down south, which they had to transport lumber quite much further, at least for the larger timbers that they would have needed. But yeah, indeed, like I said, go ahead and pause or slow down if you're as intrigued about some of this information as I am. But again, I think it would be best if you're really, really interested to visit this site yourself, like any of the wonders in the world, especially all the information that they have for you. What I particularly like is the information is provided in signage throughout all these sites at Mesa Verde, where some of the sites like at Chaco Canyon down in New Mexico, not too several hours from here, you have to kind of buy like these virtual guides to get the full information, and that's not bad. It's like $1, $2, but at least here, all the signage and all the information is provided there. And then you can also get, hire during the season, hire specific guides who will give you even more in-depth information and insight into these sites scattered throughout Mesa Verde. And there are many. It's not just a few pit houses here and there. There's several cliff dwellings, like I said, and we'll see a little bit more of that before this clip is through, of what they look like. Unfortunately, during the winter season, not really able to, the trails don't really allow access to visit and go inside the cliff dwellings, but in the summertime, we can go into these pit houses, which I'm still showing you, and they're all along the road, the loop road that you can visit pretty much year round, as long as there's not heavy snow. But obviously the snow was kind of melted when we visited here earlier in January. But yeah, all along there are cliff dwellings. There's dozens, maybe 50 plus cliff dwellings that you can see from the road, and these towers. And but yeah, in the summertime, springtime, when the weather is better, and that's the season for visiting this site, you can actually go inside a lot of these cliff dwellings, especially if you hire a guide to take you, because some of them require climbing apparently. But here, during our visit, we're just basically to get up close to the pit houses that you see here, some of the ancient towers, and there's a lot of good signage, like I said, to inform you and provide insight and context to what you're exactly looking at here. But that definitely make a plan to come back in the summer so I can maybe go inside some of the actual cliff dwellings, which is most famous for. But yeah, the pit houses alone and the way they built them and what they were built for is worth a visit in itself, especially if you are at all interested in alternative design, building, and construction, as well as ancient history. And you could spend literally hours here visiting these sites and reading the signage and just sitting there meditating and imagining how things might have been 1,000 years ago. And you will only begin to scratch the surface of what a site like this, Mesa Verde National Park, has to offer. Again, there's many more sites here in the region, in this county alone, and adjacent counties that touch on this exact topic. And I will definitely be trying to scratch those off of my own particular bucket list for this region here as I explore my own path and exploration of human civilization and society at large. But yeah, like I said, so much to see and learn, so it's not really ideal just to kind of go for a quick little hour or something. You're going to need if you really want to get the most of this place, a full day at least. But I believe when you buy the entrance ticket, I think they give you a whole week to visit the various sites, so you can really spread out your itinerary and camp here. There's campgrounds not too far from the actual cliff dwellings, but within the park itself or nearby, you can stay in Cortez or Mancos or Durango and visit it over several days to get the most of this particular site. And it's not the only ancient site like this, and particularly in this region of La Plata County. There are several more that I have yet to get to, as well as in neighboring Archuleta County to the east here in Colorado, as well as in San Juan County, New Mexico, which is to the south, right? The New Mexico-Colorado border is just to the south of this place here. But indeed, I will be back again, perhaps during this coming summer season here to get more information. But, in my particular situation, I was visiting with my family, like young kid and teenager and wife. And so, 6 hours in a car is more than enough to get our fill this time around. I couldn't spend, too long here and sort of, going on a camping trip, but it's something I'm considering to do for sure. Maybe to do some stargazing or something with some other family members. This might be a good site in addition to Chaco Canyon itself. But yeah, I'm sure during the summer season, all of these sites are going to be pretty crowded here with tourists. So the advantage of going in the off season like the winter is you don't get the crowds. I mean, there's still people visiting from all over the world, but specifically here in North America, we had plates of people from Alaska, Florida, the Carolinas, all throughout California, of course, people are visiting. And so it's interesting to see in this region to look at license plates and see where people are coming from. And one of those bucket list type sites that you definitely should make time for. And not only to get insight about the ancient history but the coming near future and the coming trials that many people say that we are starting to deal with as far as the greater geological impact that we may be experiencing and to do with not only the geology of the earth, of course, but also our star, the sun, and other neighboring stars with what's going on with the galactic sheet, which I won't get into detail here just yet, but those of you who are versed in astrophysics, geophysics, solar physics trends, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, we've come to the end of this extended clip. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back in the near future with some more content. Thanks. Bye.